This is our second lesson of the week, and we're still continuing with probability. And what we're going to look at today is calculating probability of compound event. What does compound mean? It's basically an event that is made out of more than one single event. So the easiest example to think about is a coin, tossing a coin. So if I toss the coin, the possible events, possible results will be either I got a head or a tail. Okay, that's what we call a single event. What if I toss the coin twice? Okay, then either I got heads and heads. First toss I got a head, then I got the second one, I got the head again. Or I can get a heads in the first one and a tail in the second one. Or I can get a tail in the first toss and a heads in the second toss. Or I can get tail in the first and a tail in the second. So that's what we call a compound event. Now, we're going to try and calculate the probability of having different results. Okay, let's say, what's the probability of getting a head and then a tail? Okay. Now, to do that, we're going to use two different types of tools, I can call them. The first one is called two-way table. So I'm going to write down the possible results of the first toss, which is head or tail. That's a possible event that I can get. And I'm going to write the possible result of the second toss over here. Okay? So again, I can get either head and tail. And when I combine them, I draw it like a table. It's a table. And when a column and a row meet, that's basically the result of the first toss and the second toss. So let's say I got a head in the first toss and a head in the second toss. So what I'm going to get is, let's use green. Okay, I'm going to get head and head. If I got a head in the first toss and tail in the second toss, I'm going to get head and tail, H and T. Okay, H and T, head and tail. If I got tail in the second toss, okay, but head in the first one, I'll get tails in the head. And if I got a tail in the first and in the second toss, I'm going to get tail and tail. Now, in a minute, we're going to use this table to answer the different question of different probability. But before we do that, let's introduce another tool that will help us. Okay, it's important to know both tools, and this one is called a tree diagram. Okay, so now I'm going from left to right, and every time I have a split, that means there was some kind of event took place. So the first toss here, I can either get a head or a tail. The second toss here, again, if I got the heads in the first one, I can get a head or a tail in the second toss. If I got a tail in the second toss, now it splits again because I tossed the coin again, I can get either a head or a tail. Now we can look at each branch, really. Each branch here, let me just stand here. Each branch represents a certain chain of events. So if I go through this branch, I go through two H's. That means I got a heads in the first and a heads in the tail, heads in the second toss. So that's kind of like this. If I got a head and then a tail, it's kind of like, it's exactly the same as this little square. If I got a tail and then a head, it's going to be tail and then head. And if I got two tails, it's this branch. Okay, so you see it's the same thing. Now, let's answer some questions. Okay, so we're going to use this very simple example to solve some problems, which are not difficult, but to also understand a couple of very important rules. Let's start with the first probability. By the way, this example is page 313. If you want to check this, read page 313 before I explain this. I think it will be useful. Just have it next to you. So we want to calculate the probability that I'm getting head in the first toss. Okay? So let's try and use the table. What's the probability that I'm going to get head in the first toss? Well, it's either going to be head, if I'm looking at both tosses together, heads and heads, that means I got a head in the first toss, or heads and then tail. Okay? The other two possible events, they are no goer because we didn't get heads in the first tail. Heads in the first toss. So I've got two possible events I'm looking at out of four altogether, right? I've got four possible events. H, 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 T, T, H, and T, T. So 2 over 4. But obviously we know we need to also simplify it to a half. But I could have answered straight away by looking at the tree diagrams. How would I do that? Look at this. What we normally do on each branch, we write down the probability. So before I toss the coin, what would be the probability that I get a half? Well, I either get what's the probability that I get a head? I either get a head or tail. So the probability is going to be 1/2. What will be the probability that I get a tail in the first toss? Again, 1/2. So always in the tree diagrams, on the branches themselves, we write down the probability. And by the way, here we can straight away see that we could have written the probability of getting a head in the first toss is half. I didn't really need to count all these possible. I'll just say half. Okay? Now, but let's take it further. If I got a head in the first toss, what's the probability and again going to get the head? Well, it doesn't change anything here. It doesn't affect it, so it's still going to be half. And the same here. The probability of getting a tail is also going to be half. Basically, you can see there is one branch out of 2, so it's 1/2. What will be the probability of getting a head if I got a tail in the first toss? Still a half. And the same thing for a tail after a tail. Okay? Let's move on to the probability of getting a head and a head. In other words, 2 heads. Let's start by looking at the two-way table. So how many times did I get just head and head? There's just one possible event, head and head. So it's going to be 1 out of how many altogether? There's still only 4 possible events. So the probability is 1 out of 4. Now let's try and do the same thing in the tree diagram. So I'm looking here. What I've done here, I've written the compound events. So I got H the first and H in the second one. So overall I got H and H. Remember, we've done that. Now, what's the probability I got H and then H again? There's just one possibility out of these 4. So again, it's going to be 1 out of 4. Okay, so I get the same answer. So, sorry, hang on, just somebody's... Oh, look at this. Okay, here, this is my good friend. Shalom, shalom. אני רק אגיד להם מי אתה, okay? This is a good friend of mine, Professor Pupik, okay? I have to... אני אומר להם את זה עכשיו, כן? אני חוזר אליך שנייה. Unfortunately, he doesn't speak English. He can only understand Hebrew. So I'm just going to talk to him Hebrew אז. כן, אנחנו מלמדים עכשיו פה בהסתברות. אתה רוצה להגיד להם? באמת? אוקיי. זה כפול זה רבע. יפה. אתה רוצה להגיד להם? אוקיי, אני אגיד. Okay, he just wants to tell you something. He just noticed here something. So I'm just going to translate. Okay? אני אגיד להם עכשיו. Okay. So Professor Pupik, he basically realized that, look at this probability of a quarter, okay? To get that, what we can do is multiply the probability half times half. I'm just going to put him down here, okay, so I can write down. So look at this. If I take half times half, okay, I'm also going to get a quarter. And we're going to make these notes in a minute, but the probability for something, for 2 events to happen, one after another, to get a heads in the first toss and a heads in the second time, the key word is and, for those 2 events to happen, one after another, all I got to do is multiply the probability of each one of these events. That works with independent events, okay, which are all the events that we're talking about. Okay, let's move on to Toda Rabba, Professor Pupik. Thank you very much, and we'll come back to him later. I'm sure he will have some stuff to say to us. Let's move on to the next problem. Okay, so we're still the same problem, but just answering different questions. So the next one we want to ask is, what's the probability that I'm going to get a head and a tail, but not in that specific order. So it can be either head and then tail, or tail then head. Looking at the two-way table, it's very easy. Head, table, table, head. In other words, I've got 2 possibilities. Divide by 4 is a half. Okay? Now, looking here, again, okay, remember we said that for the probability that heads and heads, we just multiply it, so that's a quarter. Probability of getting heads and tail, we multiply like Professor Pulpik told us, half times half, it's a quarter. Here it tails and then a head, it's at half times half, it's also a quarter. And tail is going to be also a quarter. So we've got two probabilities, heads and tail and head. We know that altogether is 2/4. And yes, אני ידעתי שאתה תרצה להגיד, Professor Pupik he wants to tell us something new. Let him just tell it to me, okay? כן, אני מבין, אני ידעתי שתגיד את זה. אני אגיד להם את זה עוד פעם? שאני אגיד להם, okay, alright. So I'm just going to put him there, okay? What Professor Pupik wants to say is, look at this, okay? I know that the probability of getting one head and one tail, not in a specific order, is half. What he's telling us, look, to get a half, all I've got to do is add the probability of getting heads and then tail, plus the probability of getting tail and then head. I'll write it down for you. So the probability of getting one head or tail in any order is the probability of getting heads and then tail, plus the probability of getting tail and then head. Okay? So, and we will make notes for that in a second. The probability of getting either event A or event B, is adding both probability. So it's half plus half. To get the probability of both events to take place, we need to multiply. The probability of getting two events, either that or that, the key word is or, we adding it, and that's a quarter. That should have been a quarter, and that should have been a quarter, and together half. Okay, guys? Right, let's move on to the next problem, and that's the probability of getting no heads. Okay, that's kind of going to be an easy one. What's the probability of getting no heads? Well, the only possible thing that takes place is tail and tail. Okay? And either I'm looking at here, it's going to be 1 out of 4, or I can use the tree diagram. The probability is going to be 1 out of 4. Okay, guys? Right. One last thing. Okay. The probability of, what was the question? The probability of getting at least one head. The probability of getting minimum one head. Okay? Now, the easy way of doing it is just by looking what possible events have at least one head. Well, this is one. I've got two heads. Here I've got one head. Here I've got one head. So the only one that doesn't quantify is tail and tail. So just like Professor Pupik said, what we will do, we'll do a quarter. We'll add them because they're either that or that or that, because we want minimum one head. It could be two. Okay? So quarter plus quarter plus quarter, and the answer is going to be 3/4. Okay, guys, I'm going to stop here. The video is getting a bit longer. I'm going to do one more video with another problem.